Let's go through the papers first of all. A little bit of a mixed bag, it must be said. So, the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. I am on motorists' side, says PM, as he orders a review of anti-car schemes. The Sunday Times, I can see a picture of Jeremy Clarkson, but the main headline is Sunak to pour millions into North Sea oil. It's a story that suggests he's at odds with Keir Starmer over that particular policy. The Observer revealed how hidden delays blight care for cancer patients. Post-pandemic story that many of you will be familiar with there. The Mail on Sunday goes with holiday chaos fear over EU Big Brother visas. This is about us now in this post-Brexit future having to apply to the equivalent of ESTAs, as we would when we went to the US or other countries. The Sunday Express, not again, winter energy bills to soar. Great news if anyone's been looking at the profits being made by some of these energy companies. Sun on Sunday, Shona quits Enders. OK, it's not something we'll cover on this show, but it's good if you're a soap fan. Sunday Mirror, Sunak's copter cop-out. This is about the PM's air miles and the Mirror taking a position on that. Well, to have a look at everything that's in the newspapers today, I'm joined by Martin Townsend, former editor of the Sunday Express, former editor of OK Magazine, my former boss for 15 years. Martin, lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you too.
Well, let's kick off with what Sunak says in the Sunday Telegraph. He's now coming out on the side of the motorist.
Yes.
I can't think why.
No.
After Uxbridge was retained by the Tories on the back of ULEZ, we think. But tell me about this interview.
Well, I think it's good news in the sense that, for me, it's the Tories actually kind of admitting to something here, because he's talking about the LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, as well as ULEZ. And actually, the LTNs is something that the Tories have got to be partly responsible for, because they poured loads of money into creating these low traffic neighbourhoods during COVID, or using COVID as a bit of a cover for it, and said it would carry on during COVID and then they'd review it. Well, they haven't reviewed it. And in a lot of areas, including where I live in West London, it's now just being used as a cash cow by the council. We've got a couple of streets in West London where I live, 2 streets, where there have been 100,000 penalty notices issued to drivers going up the wrong... 100,000 and £13 million made in a year from 2 streets in West London.
That is extraordinary.
It's extraordinary. And so what's happening here is, from being something which I think we can all agree with, we want to kind of get emissions down. And the other thing is then it's not getting emissions down, because what it's doing is it's moving all the traffic onto a few roads instead of sharing it out amongst everybody, which is what I understand a democracy should be. Now it's certain streets, main roads. Well, of course, along those main roads are still a lot of people living.
Also,
along
people
those main roads.
Plagued by congestion. There's lots of people that often say that back in the day, if they were electricians or plumbers, they'd do 10 jobs a day in London. Now they're doing 5 because it's taken them so long to get from A to B. Also, presumably, as they're in traffic, they're belching out fumes. I just don't get any of this.
Well, absolutely.
It's just counterintuitive.
It goes back to the 1970s. I grew up in a school. I come from Harrow originally, and my school was in a huge traffic gridlock. It was surrounded by gridlocked traffic all day long, and you could literally get the black smoke off of the leaves around the school. And they changed it in the end. They brought in this kind of one-way system in Harrow. But that kind of concentrated pollution is desperately bad.
So it's not helping
So it's not helping at all. And I think a review of those LTNs and kicking out quite a few of them, I think, would be a good thing. And Rishi Sunak is indicating something along those lines today.
I mean, it's interesting that he's being quite bold in that interview. I think when he's at his boldest, he's at his best, to be perfectly honest.
Well, he needs to be, doesn't he?
And there's also a quick note on the Sunday Times front page about Sunak to pour millions into North Sea oil. This obviously puts him at odds with Starmer, who says he doesn't want any more new drilling. Again, quick word on that. That's good politics, isn't it, Martin?
Well, it is. And, I mean, we know that Labour might as well just put blackouts into their manifesto, because that's what always happens under Labour government.
Job losses, according to the
Job losses and blackouts. And actually, we will get blackouts. We cannot just axe all of that North Sea. We can't not grant those licences. It would cost thousands of jobs. And it's just crazy for the country's energy needs. So
let's look at the other theme of the
news.
day, which I'm calling the banking farrago or farago. Did you get what
Very
I've done
good.
There? I was taught by the best. My job is words. Now, we've got a number of different stories. We've got Nigel is coming on the show in just a moment, but he's in the Sunday Telegraph talking about this new website he's set up to help other people who have been debanked. We've also got this extraordinary story in The Sun on Sunday. Grant Shapps reveals he and his entire family have been hit by the debanking scandal. And then we've got a story on the front of the Sunday Times, bad boys of Brexit claim they were debanked like Farage. This is talking about Aaron Banks and Andy Wigmore. People didn't speak about it back then because they were worried they were going to be debanked by other banks and their credit rating would fail. I mean, Farage has played a blinder on this campaign from a newspaper perspective, hasn't he?
Oh, he's been extraordinary. I mean, he's being called the most influential political figure since Margaret Thatcher, and in many ways he is. And for a lot of ordinary people, they'll be saying Farage is our champion. There is nobody else in government like him.
Are you worried about this, having been the editor of quite a right-wing newspaper, that you might be targeted?
Oh, totally, and I'm sure I have been. I'm absolutely certain that I have been, because, you know, my problem with this is it's coming from a position, the banks are coming from a position where, you know, the country's institutionally racist, which I don't personally believe, where, you know, there is no diversity, where there's no... And they're all signing up to these schemes and signing into these kind of woke schemes, basically, and then putting them into action, and it's basically undemocratic. It's
this policy of if you don't agree with me, then you're cancelled.
100%.
I mean, what happened to agreeable disagreement, which is what we try to promote on this channel,
I personally think cancellation should be a hate crime. I personally think that.
Well, talking about cancellation, the Mail on Sunday... I mean, it is slightly silly season-ish, but it's a good read. Have come up with a woke list 2023. Who's in it? And more importantly, who isn't, Martin?
Well, there's Dame Alison Rose finds us way in there, which you wouldn't be surprised. At number one, we have the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Oh, yes. The Archbishop of Woke.
The Archbishop of Woke, who, as we know, put aside £100 million of church money at the beginning of the year.
Actually, that reminds me, I should ask Priti Patel about what she thinks.
Yes, to investigate the church's links to slavery. I mean, that £100 million, I'm sure all of the parishioners all over the country where churches are closing, hundreds of churches are closing, they're having to share because I'm sure they're really pleased that £100 million being put aside for
the pews are emptying and they're going on about diversity and inclusion.
Well, going on about ancient history.
A few people not in there. I noticed Carol Vorderman isn't in that woke list.
No, which I'm very surprised about.
Some interesting interactions with her on Twitter over the weekend. So maybe they'll do a woke list Mark 2 and we can look forward to that. Now, final story. This was your choice. This is in The Observer. Home Office secretly backs face recognition to curb shoplifting. You feel really strongly about this. I mean, there's this sense to which the police are saying, well, we're not really going to deal with shoplifting because, you know, it's not a major crime. But for the shopkeepers affected, this is huge.
Well, for a start, I think we should get rid of, and the police should stop using the phrase low-level crime. Because there is no such thing as low-level crime. They count shoplifting, you know, car thefts, low-level crime. They're not. They have a huge impact on communities all over the country. If your local shop has the window kicked in, like ours did, our local co-op had its window kicked in and was robbed 2 or 3 weeks ago. If that happens, what it affects is it affects the security of the whole community. Everybody feels ill at ease, particularly the elderly, particularly the vulnerable. This stuff is happening.
Face recognition, though, it's quite a big measure.
Face recognition,
Big Brother-ish.
I'm not sure about, and The Observer obviously sort of saying that as well. But, you know, shops can help themselves a little bit. You know, have this till at the front of the store, don't put it at the back of the store. They need to basically shell out to employ somebody to keep an eye on the shop. They should have security. Some of the local shops do have that.
But it's always the same serial offenders. I observed this in St Albans High Street, you know, the other day. Somebody going into Poundland, of all places, just filling a rucksack.
Yes.
I said to the staff, there's this lad doing this. But that's the way it works.
Yeah, and it's basically unfair, you know, for people that are really hard up at the moment, that are struggling to make ends meet, to see people walking in and out of shops stealing this stuff.
I mean, talking about, to conclude, Sunak and Starmer, if they both just have pushed an agenda of fairness, regardless of the ideology, they'd probably win quite a lot of votes.
Yes, well, if Starmer pushed an agenda on anything, I'd be impressed, but there we are.
Martin Townsend, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.